Okay, so you want to own a dog daycare, and on paper, this might be the most emotionally bulletproof business in America. Americans now spend $158 billion a year on their pets. There are almost 90 million dogs in this country, the highest number ever recorded. Veterinary prices have risen more than 55% since 2019, faster than gasoline, and people pay it without blinking. The product sells itself. You get paid to let dogs play. And there's one more thing, the thing every franchise brochure has been built around for 5 years. America is going back to the office, and a dog that used to sleep at its owner's feet all day now needs somewhere to go. America didn't go back. Here's the number nobody in this industry puts on a billboard. Camp Bow Wow, one of the 2 largest dog daycare franchises in the country, is legally required to disclose what its franchisees actually earn. In its own filing, covering 202 locations, the bottom quarter of owners took home negative $10,276. Negative $10,000, those owners put between $1 million and $1.8 million into a building. At the end of the year, they paid for the privilege of working there. And that's not some failing brand. In that same filing, the top quarter of owners cleared $400,000. Same sign, same manual, same training, a $410,000 gap inside one company. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the $158 billion pet economy has almost nothing to do with you, why this is the one business where filling the building does not fix the margin, where every 12 additional dogs require another human being forever, and why the person who sets the ceiling on your prices isn't a competitor with a building. It's a guy with a spare bedroom and an app. And one more thing, there is a single clause, standard boilerplate in the general liability policy hanging on your office wall, which means that $1 million policy does not cover one single dog inside your building, not one. Most owners learn what it says on the worst day of their professional life. We'll get there. This business is younger than most people watching this. In 1987, a veterinary technician and dog walker named Joseph Sporn opened a place on Manhattan's Upper West Side called Yuppie Puppy. The idea was almost absurdly simple. Instead of leaving dogs in crates while their owners worked, let them off the leash together in a supervised room. That's the invention. Before that, commercial dog care in America meant a kennel, a run, a gate, and a dog waiting in it. Look at the name he chose, Yuppie Puppy. He wasn't naming the dogs. He was naming the customer, young urban professionals with money, no children yet, and a job that took them out of the apartment 10 hours a day. The product was never about the dog. It was about the owner's commute. It has been about the owner's commute ever since. And that is the most important sentence in this video. It took 13 years to become a business model. In December of 2000, Heidi Ganahl opened the first Camp Bow Wow in Colorado. 2 years later, Amy Nichols opened the first Dogtopia in Virginia, both franchised within a few years. Then the money arrived. In 2024, Blackstone completed its acquisition of Rover, the largest pet sitting platform in the world, for about $2.3 billion. That same year, Camp Bow Wow was bought by the parent company of a national sign franchise. Private equity began assembling chains. One operator now runs more than 190 locations across 35 states, 37 years from one room above a Manhattan sidewalk to a line item in a Blackstone portfolio. And at the far end of that arc stands the person this video is about, the one who owns exactly one building. So let's build it. Start with space, because dogs are not restaurant tables. Guidance runs 40 to 100 square feet of play area per dog, 40 for the small ones, at least 70 for anything large. That's play area only before the the lobby, the office, the bathing room, the laundry, the storage, and the isolation room you are absolutely going to need. The average Camp Bow Wow location works out to roughly 7,900 square feet. Now the floor, non-porous, non-slip, sealed, and able to survive being disinfected every single day. In practice, epoxy over concrete, and it has to drain, which means slope, which means trench drains cut into the slab and tied into the sewer. You cannot add drainage later. This is why a dog daycare doesn't simply move into an empty retail unit. The building gets rebuilt from the concrete up. Then comes the part nobody pictures: air. Veterinary standards for animal housing call for something like 10 to 20 air changes per hour. An office building runs 1 to 3. You need 5 to 10 times more fresh air than an office the same size. Genuinely fresh, because recirculating it just distributes pathogens through the building. And you can't bolt on a bigger exhaust fan, because in a modern building, the overwhelming majority of your HVAC bill isn't the fans. It's heating, cooling, and dehumidifying the air you're throwing outside. What does that cost? You don't have to guess, because it's printed in a federal disclosure document. In Dogtopia's 2025 filing, HVAC equipment gets its own line, $69,000 to $111,000. That single line is bigger than the furniture, the equipment, and the signage combined. Nobody imagining a dog daycare imagines a ventilation contractor. It's the second largest thing you will buy, and there's a cruel joke in the build. The epoxy surfaces you're required to install for sanitation are acoustically the worst possible choice. In peer-reviewed shelter research, peak levels in a room of barking dogs exceeded 118.9 decibels, and that number is simply the ceiling of what the meter could record. Federal workplace rules require a formal hearing conservation program with annual hearing tests for every employee, starting at 85. The floors that keep the dogs healthy are the floors that make the noise worse. You pay for both. Add it up. Dogtopia's disclosed total investment runs from $607,000 to $1.27 million. Camp Bow Wow's ran from about $1 million to $1.77 million. And there's one line that reads like a gift: landlord contributions of up to $263,000, printed as a negative number. Read it again though. Your landlord is covering up to a third of the construction, which tells you exactly how specialized and immovable that construction is. He isn't being generous. He's buying a tenant who can never leave. And you haven't taken in a single dog yet. Here's where the intuition breaks. You think you're selling dog care. You're not. You're selling the working day of the person who owns the dog, and you have no control over it whatsoever. The United States Census Bureau tracks revenue for pet care services excluding veterinary. In 2019, that industry did $6.67 billion. In 2020, it did $5.96 billion, down 10.6%. Stop on that. 2020 was the year America bought dogs. Adoptions surged. The dog population hit a record. There had never been more customers in the history of the product, and revenue fell by more than a tenth because the dog was never the customer. The commute was. Then the recovery. $8.04 billion in 2021, up almost 35%. $9.97 billion in 2022, up another 24, 50% above where it started in 2 years. That whipsaw explains the entire investment thesis of the last 5 years. Everybody looked at the recovery line, drew it forward, and built buildings. Every franchise sold in the last 5 years was sold on one sentence: as pet parents return to the office, demand for daycare will grow. It's worth being precise about what actually happened, because this is where $1 million of somebody's money went. Before the pandemic, about 5 to 7% of paid working days in America were done from home. In 2020, it hit roughly 60%, and then it came down and stopped. Since 2023, it's been sitting at about 25% of paid days, and it hasn't moved. Nicholas Bloom, the Stanford economist who's tracked this more closely than anyone, said in 2026 that it has stabilized around 28%, and that there is no chance we return to 2019, 25%, not five times the pre-pandemic level permanently. But wait, the mandates: Amazon, JP Morgan, Dell, Boeing, Goldman Sachs, they all ordered people back 5 days a week, and they were real. By the second quarter of 2025, 54% of employees at Fortune 100 companies were under a 5-day mandate, up from 11% a year earlier. Here's what the headlines left out. Estimates of the effect of all those announced mandates on the national share of work from home days come to something on the order of 0.5 percentage point. The return to office happened to the top of corporate America. It did not happen to America, and a dog daycare in a suburban strip of industrial space does not serve the Fortune 100. It serves the accountant, the nurse, the developer, the small firm lawyer, people who now go in Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. You didn't lose your customer. You lost 2 of their 5 days. And if you're running at the 70% occupancy your break even requires, that isn't a soft landing. That's the whole margin. Meanwhile, the buildings kept opening. The number of businesses in pet grooming and boarding has been growing at more than 8% a year. Industry revenue in 2026 is growing at 1.6. Supply is expanding roughly 5 times faster than the money coming in. And the industry knows. In early 2025, the president of a pet care consultancy wrote in the industry's own trade magazine that facilities nationwide had seen the same slowdown in daycare attendance and boarding nights. Among the reasons she listed remote work keeping owners home during the day. The trade press was diagnosing the disease while the brochures were still selling the cure. Say none of that stops you. You build it, you fill it, you're at 70%. Now the business hits a wall no amount of demand can fix. In most businesses with heavy fixed costs, a gym, a cinema, a parking garage, volume is salvation. You pay for the building once, and every additional customer is nearly pure profit. That's the entire reason to accept a $1 million build. That is not how this works. Industry standards put one staff member with every 10 to 15 dogs in active group play, not on average across the week. At every moment, the dogs are together. So a 60-dog room needs 5 people standing in it, plus a front desk, plus a manager. Every 12 dogs you add a human being forever, which is why the payroll numbers are what they are. Camp Bo. WOW's disclosure puts payroll at 42% of revenue across 202 locations. Dogtopia reports 44.8%. 2 independent franchise systems, 2 accounting departments, the same answer. Follow the dollar at an average location doing $1,039,000 a year. Payroll takes 42 cents, rent takes 15, royalties and the ad fund take 8 more. 65 cents gone on 3 lines. Out of the 35 left, you pay utilities, insurance, cleaning supplies, software, repairs, food, local marketing, and depreciation. What reaches the owner at the median is 14%, $142,297. Hold that number because we're not finished. It's calculated before debt service, and almost nobody buys $1 million building with cash. Run a standard 10-year loan of $1.2 million at around 10%, and the annual payment is roughly $194,000. The median owner's income is $142,000. The loan wants $194,000. The median doesn't cover the loan, not the bottom quartile, the middle. And now the royalty looks different too. 7% of revenue to the franchisor plus 1 for advertising is about $79,000 a year from the average location, more than half of what the median owner takes home. And the franchisor gets paid whether that operator finishes the year at $400,000 or at -10. Meanwhile, the brochure for this industry promises EBITDA margins of 32% to 40%. The legally required disclosure says the median owner keeps 14, and a quarter of them keep nothing at all. Now, the clause. Every one of these businesses carries general liability insurance, $1 million per occurrence, $2 million aggregate, about $639 a year at the median. It's the cheapest serious line item in the whole operation, roughly 0.1% of revenue. And a standard general liability policy contains an exclusion called care, custody, and control. Property that is in your possession is excluded from coverage. It's boilerplate. It's in nearly every policy of this type in America. Under the law of most states, a dog is property. Read those two sentences together. Your $1 million policy will pay for the customer who slips in your lobby. It will not pay 1 cent for the dog that dies in your playroom. The single thing your business exists to be responsible for is the specific thing your main policy excludes. There is a fix, a separate endorsement called Animal Bailey coverage. It starts around $16 a year, which buys a limit of $2,000 per animal. $2,000 covers one bad surgery. Real coverage runs about $4,600, and many small operators never buy it because $16 looked like insurance. And here's the part that inverts everything. If the worst happens, the law is on your side, and that is precisely the problem. Because a dog is property, the traditional measure of damages is fair market value, the same standard used for a couch, a rug, a vase, and the fair market value of a beloved 11-year-old mixed breed rescue is, in the cold language of the courts, close to nothing. Most states allow no damages for emotional distress at all. Tennessee became the first state to permit them and capped them at $5,000. So the family whose dog died in your building will very likely never win a meaningful judgment against you. They'll write a review instead in the neighborhood group with a photo, and the whole town will read it. That costs you every new customer for a year. The legal exposure here is small. The reputational exposure is total. It isn't the lawsuit that closes you. It's the post. This is not hypothetical. On the 24th of August, 2025, in Argyle, New York, investigators found 21 dead dogs at a boarding facility. 21. The owners were charged with 22 counts under state agriculture law, failure to provide water and ventilation. Family members of one of the dogs said the central air conditioning had failed overnight. The sentence was probation, which brings us to the most uncomfortable fact in this industry. Nobody knows how often this happens. There is no national data on injuries or deaths in dog daycare because until recently nobody collected any. In Massachusetts, the only requirement was a town license if you had 4 or more dogs and 1 inspection a year. That changed because a 7-month-old Labradoodle named Ollie was injured in a fight at a daycare, spent 2 months in treatment, and died. And his owner, Amy Baxter, spent years getting a law passed. Ollie's Law in 2024 finally required facilities in that state to report every injury. After the Argyle case, a New York State senator introduced a similar bill describing the current situation in one phrase: the Wild West. Fewer than 20 states have meaningful oversight. And that is not good news for you. It's the reason there are 200,000 competitors. Anyone can open one tomorrow. Almost nobody can leave. You signed a 10-year lease on a building with trench drains in the floor. Lowest barrier to entry, highest barrier to exit. It's the worst combination in business. So who are those 200,000 competitors? Here's the number that reframes everything. According to the Census Bureau, the entire country contains about 25,500 pet care establishments with employees. Industry data counts around 199,000 businesses. The gap isn't an error, it's the market. Roughly 7 out of 8 participants in this industry have no employees, and most have no building either. They're dog walkers, home boarders, sitters, people taking 3 dogs into a spare room. Their capital expenditure is 0. zero. Their rent is zero. Their ventilation system is a window, and they're not amateurs at finding customers because they have Rover, the platform Blackstone bought for $2.3 billion with more than 4 million pet owners and over 1 million service providers on it. A sitter there charges $35 to $70 a night. Your facility charges $50 to $75. Out of your $50 come the $100,000 ventilation system, the epoxy floors, the trench drains, the workers' compensation, the hearing conservation program, the licensing, and the lease. Out of his $50 comes nothing. The platform doesn't undercut your price. It removes every fixed cost from underneath it and then sets the number your customer thinks is normal. Although the platform model isn't free money either. WAG, Rover's main competitor, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in July of 2025 and was delisted from the NASDAQ. Revenue down 16%, $17.6 million of losses in its final full year. A company with no buildings at all still couldn't make the math work. Suppose you survive all of it. You run a good facility for a decade. What's it worth? Actual sales data answers that. Across 5 years of completed transactions, the median dog daycare and boarding business sold for $400,000 on revenue of about $504,000 and owner earnings of $157,000. Median multiple about 2.5 times earnings, 2.5 times what you make. That's the prize. Better than pet grooming, better than a dry cleaner, but you built a laundromat's exit multiple on $1 million of specialized concrete. You could hope for the private equity bid. There is real money rolling this industry up, but those funds want platforms, and the working threshold for interest starts around $250,000 of EBITDA. A single location almost never clears it. So the roll-up buys your neighbor's 5-location chain at a real multiple and offers you the price of your equipment and your client list, and the window is closing. In 2024, private equity deals in the pet sector were done at a median of about 16.8 times EBITDA. In 2025, 9.9. Strategic buyers went from 13 times to 8. The price of this entire industry fell by roughly 40% in a year. But the clearest signal comes from the people who sell these businesses for a living. In 2026, Camp Bow Wow announced a reduced investment model, cutting the required upfront investment by more than $400,000 and shrinking the building. Dogtopia has been rolling out a more capital-efficient design since 2024. When the two largest franchises in an industry simultaneously make their own product substantially cheaper to build, that isn't an innovation announcement, it's an admission. At the old cost, the unit didn't pay for itself. So, is it a bad business? No. And that's what makes it dangerous. The best run locations are genuinely excellent. The top quarter of Camp Bow Wow owners take home $400,000 a year on 30% margins from a business people are delighted to spend money on. That's a real outcome achieved by real people in the same year that the bottom quarter of the same brand lost money. What separates them isn't the brand, the training, or the manual. They all had those. It's occupancy, it's the local labor market, it's a lease signed in the right year, and it's whether the neighborhood around that building went back to the office or didn't, which is the honest summary of this business. You are buying $1 million of ventilation, drainage, and concrete in order to sell something you don't produce and can't control, the hours your customer spends away from home. If those hours come back, you print money. If they don't, your competitor is a man with a spare bedroom, your insurance doesn't cover your core risk, your payroll rises with every 12 dogs, and your exit is 2.5 times earnings. And there's one number that settles the question of how safe this is. People go into pet care believing it's steadier than food. Business survival data says the 5-year survival rate for the sector containing dog daycare is 60.0%. For restaurants, 59.3, 7/10 of 1 percentage point. There was never any shelter. A room full of the happiest customers in American business, or $1 million of concrete bedding on somebody else's commute. You decide.